to the Osmo MMA strategy shows. We're here to get you ready for UFC 265, which goes down on Saturday night in Houston, Texas. Of course, headlined by the interim heavyweight title fight, Derrick Lewis and Ciryl Gane. We're going to break it down all for you over the next hour. Of course, we are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. We'll talk about some Monkey Knife Fight plays later on in the show. Also, do want to let you know our show is also brought to you by our new podcast, Betting You. Who will win the Heisman? Can Georgia dethrone Alabama? Which MAC team should you be putting your money on? These questions and more are answered every Wednesday with Matt Jajeski and Ben Rasa as they talk all things college football betting. We have episodes available now on nearly every podcasting platform, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So go there and check it out today. Of course, football season in full swing. The first NFL preseason game is tonight. We got coverage over there at Osmo.com as well. But of course, we're here to break down UFC 265. As always, I'm joined by the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. Pete, we've got a ton of fights. And I'll tell you what, man, when we do the over-under on stoppage at the end of the show, it might be a low number.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's an interesting card for sure. I'm excited about the fights. I think that it's a pretty solid card, but I feel like you think it's going to go, a lot of fights are going to go the distance. We'll talk about it. I want to see your line, and I want to see if we're going to be targeting the under or over your projected finishes.
We got 13 fights. And I'm just saying,
don't even start.
Well, first off, true or false, we will have 13 fights on Saturday night.
False.
You're just gonna say, hey, like who it is, false. We ain't getting 13 fights.
Yeah, exactly. We know how it works.
Unfortunately, that is the UFC in 2021. But Pete, let's get right into it. Main event: Derrick Lewis, Ciryl Gane, interim heavyweight title on the line. Derrick Lewis 6,800 on DraftKings, 9,400 for Ciryl Gane. I will tell you, this is a matchup that, look, Derrick Lewis, he's got a puncher's chance. No question about it. I really like Ciryl Gane in this spot. I just think that he's going to play a distance game. I do think you have to, for Ciryl Gane, you got to wonder how much he potentially could go to the takedown. Well, also, I think that submission prop of Ciryl Gane via submission plus 650 is a really interesting play. But I mean, look, if you're Ciryl Gane, you got to stay out of getting into a brawl.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is an interesting stylistic matchup between a very technical striker who likes to switch stances and play the distance game very well, and that's Ciryl Gane. And you have Derrick Lewis, who doesn't seem to check all the boxes, but has that devastating KO power. And if he touches you on the chin, regardless of how the fight was going, he can put your lights out. And he's done it multiple times in the UFC where he's losing the fight pretty handily. And then, comes from behind, lands one shot, and Derrick Lewis did it again. He got up from getting taken down and controlled and stands up, lands a bomb, and it's over. So at 6,800, you definitely have to consider a guy like that. But for me, when I look at the fight tape and, I see how they could, clash stylistically. I really like Ciryl Gane in the fight. I think that he's, defensively sound. He has good footwork. He likes to move after he strikes. I think that, a focus of his camp will be digging to that body of Derrick Lewis, where we've seen Derrick Lewis sometimes be susceptible to some body shots. And then, when Derrick Lewis throws a wide shot, I think that he can incorporate some takedowns and solidify rounds or work towards a submission finish. But, I think that this is going to be not a dominant performance, but, you're going to know that Ciryl Gane went in there and, won the fight pretty handily. I think that Derrick Lewis could make Ciryl Gane a little tentative at times because of that crazy KO power. But at 6,800, puncher's chance, worth a shot, I think, in at least 10 to 15% of your lineups. If you are a Derrick Lewis backer, then go a little bullish on that number. And you already know that Ciryl Gane is going to have massive ownership. So, play the contrarian route. But for me, it's Ciryl Gane, 9,400. I don't even want to overthink it. I like him. I like the potential in 5 rounds.
And of course, ownership is already up over there at Osmo.com. One of the, Pete, I'm sure you're familiar with this stat, but a stat that really did stick out to me is strikes landed per minute. Derrick Lewis 2.59 as opposed to Ciryl Gane at 5.13.
Yeah.
And I just think it just shows Derrick Lewis, he's just not a volume puncher, but he can end anyone's night at any moment. I have seen, it seems like the betting community is going to hammer the under 4.5 rounds on this one. And I think that's a wise move.
Yeah, and I think it's because of, multiple things. You have Derrick Lewis's power that can change, the course of the fight in one shot. You have Ciryl Gane's submission possibility and potential. You have him possibly, landing shots and TKO in Derrick Lewis. We've seen Derrick Lewis kind of, check himself out of fights in the past where he starts getting beat and dominated, and it looks like he quits at times. I'm a big Derrick Lewis fan. Maybe that, this fight being in Texas is going to mean something else, and you're going to see the best out of Derrick Lewis. But also Derrick Lewis's cardio is something that he's been working on extensively throughout the years. And I still think, from the outside, Ciryl Gane will probably pick him apart, and ultimately it will lead to a finish and in Ciryl Gane's favor.
Since you mentioned the fact that we are in Texas, we got to mention that means we got Texas judges.
Yeah, I mean,
so we could have some bad scorecards.
Does it really matter anymore, right? Like, of how inconsistent judging is in general. Like,
true story. True story.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like at the Apex we have great judging to begin with. I mean, there's some solid judges and some consistent cards, but overall it's just a nightmare. And we definitely need a change in the sport.
Yeah, very much so. Of course, I mentioned about that the ownership data is up over at awesemo.com. And if you're not an Awesemo Plus member, you want to get behind a little peek but what's behind the paywall today, MLB player rankings is free over there at awesemo.com. Of course, I appreciate everyone that's in here on a Thursday watching us. Of course, be sure to give us a subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Got a ton of great shows for you each and every day. I do got to remind you that we do have football tonight. And for the first time ever, we have NFL preseason projections. That's right. NFL preseason projections are up over awesemo.com. They're going to be behind the paywall next week. But for tonight's Hall of Fame game between the Steelers and the Cowboys, they are 100% free. So be sure to go check them out right there over at awesemo.com. Let's get into the co-main event. We got Jose Aldo taking on Pedro Munoz. I want to mention this comment that I saw in our premium Slack channel about this fight where it says, Munoz too cheap for a pick'em fight. Munoz 7,600 on DraftKings, $14 over on FanDuel. On the other side of the equation, Jose Aldo 8,600 and $16 over there. As I'm going through, I'm putting some dots down here on my spreadsheet that I printed up here on fights I think got a good chance to go to distance. This is one of them. Yeah,
I might take an underweight approach to this fight if we're being honest. I just think that it's two high level strikers with solid ground games, and whenever you have two evenly matched opponents, sometimes their strengths negate each other. And I will say that I think Pedro Munoz will be a popular underdog play because, he's been better of late than Jose Aldo has. But if you really go and you dive into the records, like Jose Aldo has fought just like murderer's row, where he's fought legitimate competition ever since he came over from the WEC. But with all that being said, he has accumulated a ton of damage over time. So you have to wonder, is he a shell of himself? Is he not the same fighter? It's pretty clear he's not the same fighter, but I do think that he's still, within that high caliber range. In the Marlon Vera fight, he did look good at times, and he resorted to some of his grappling. I do think that, that's probably not going to be the approach in this fight against Pedro Munoz because they're both so dangerous in that department. But for me, I think this is going 15, man. I really do. And, I understand the exposure to Pedro Munoz at 7,600, completely warranted. Jose Aldo in the middle at 8,600, probably a guy I'm okay with getting away from. I actually expect Jose Aldo to win this fight, if we're being honest. Like, I think that Jose Aldo is going to go out there and the speed's just going to be the difference maker. I think that he's just going to be a little too quick for Pedro Munoz. Yes, Pedro Munoz has a hell of a chin. He puts together great combinations and great submissions to rely on. But I feel like it could be like a 2-to-1 output in Jose Aldo's favor. So for me, it's pass on the fight. I pick Jose Aldo to win. But if you really are dying for an underdog, you could do worse than Pedro Munoz.
Yeah, I agree with what you say there. I mean, I think this fight is closer than what the DraftKings odds are in terms of this, in terms of the salary. I don't mind getting a little bit of Pedro Munoz. I just don't know if this thing goes 15 minutes, if Pedro Munoz can be optimal based on a fight that likely stays on the feet, and I just don't think there's going to be enough volume to make him optimal in that lineup. But I'll give you a crazy stat here. You realize Jose Aldo is younger than TJ Dillashaw?
It's crazy, right? Like, I goes to show you, like, what Jose Aldo has accomplished within his career. And, it goes to show you that his early dominance is like up there with some of the best because of his age too, right? Like, he was relatively immature and he was just dominating everybody. So it's just like, I feel like he can get back to that, but he needs to start being smart, especially at this division that he dropped down, right? Like, you would expect the former featherweight king to start to have tons of success at bantamweight. And I definitely think there's a path for it, but he has to be on his P's and Q's against Pedro Munoz and just kind of use his speed to his advantage.
Yeah, my thing is always is at what point are we going to see the decline in Jose Aldo? And you mentioned about, Jose did go the grappling round against Chito Vera. I don't think he goes the grappling round in this one just because Pedro Munoz is a much better grappler than Chito Vera is in that one. So I text Pete yesterday and I told him, I said, you know what? I can't wait to hear your analysis on Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. This is actually the fight that I am the most interested in outside of the main event on this card. And Vicente Luque, 8,500 over on DraftKings, $15 over on FanDuel. Chiesa's also $15 over on FanDuel. Chiesa, 7,700 on DraftKings. I think on the FanDuel side of the equation, Vicente Luque, I think, is a interesting play because, Pete, he's going to have to stop takedowns. I mean, to me, I think breaking down the fight is pretty simple. I think it just comes down to, if this fight plays on the feet, to me, it's Vicente Luque all day. But if Chiesa gets this thing to the ground, I think this is a prime spot for a 7,700 Michael Chiesa. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the matchups I'll be most exposed to be honest. I think that, there's a lot of potential for both fighters, and in their victories, they tend to score pretty well. Michael Chiesa, 7,700, one of the best wrestlers on the slate, if not the best wrestler on the slate, where, we know that DraftKings scorings really caters to that style. And if you can go in there and just close the gap between him and Vicente Luque, make his striking just not even a part of the equation at all, and just force Vicente Luque to defend takedowns, work towards getting back control, tripping them, mat returning him. I think that we could be looking at a Michael Chiesa upset here. With all that being said, we've also seen, Vicente Luque catch people with his hands, threaten with chokes. And Michael Chiesa, in some of his defeats, he has been, hit with shots and almost looked checked out at times and been submitted. So I feel like you have to roster this fight. And admittedly, I've been flip-flopping on this matchup all day long, all week long. I think I have a lean towards Michael Chiesa, to be honest. I really do. I just think just an overpowering wrestler can pose so many problems for a fighter, especially when you are like, the striking is going to be in Vicente Luque's favor. But if you are, always hunting submissions, that's good. But it also means that you're somewhat being, comfortable off of your back. If Vicente Luque gets Michael Chiesa in front headlock position, you can definitely see him working towards a Darce choke, threatening that neck and, exposing, that little deficiency in Chiesa's game. But I don't know if that submission is really going to be a part of the equation because, Michael Chiesa is going to be looking for the body lock a lot, tripping him down, looking to get back control. And back control, if you look at Vicente Luque's previous fights, he has been out wrestled in some of his losses. So like I said, I've been flip-flopping all day. It's a lean towards Chiesa because of the value and just the takedowns. But I feel like you have to roster this fight. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the 3 losses in Vicente Luque's UFC run, 2 of them have something in common. The fact that he was taken down in his very first fight against Michael Graves. He was taken down 7 times against Leon Edwards. He was taken down 3 times. And, of course, his other loss was against Stephen Thompson, which was a straight-up striking matchup. But to me, this is just one of those fights that I think if you're Chiesa, there's a clear path. But if Chiesa can't get this to ground, Luque, and that's why I think over on FanDuel, I think Luque is a very interesting play over there at $15.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think that, if Luque went out there and just completely finished Michael Chiesa, it wouldn't surprise me one bit because of just the skills that he brings to the table. He's a finisher. And I think that Chiesa knows and recognizes the danger in this matchup. We're going to see the best out of both guys. And I'm excited because I really feel like the winner of this matchup has a lot of potential moving forward.
Before we move on to the next matchup, do want to let you know that we do have 2 new YouTube channels that you need to subscribe to. If you love what we do for DFS, and you're going to love what we do for season-long fantasy football and sports betting, just click the link in the YouTube chat to subscribe to those channels and make sure to turn on those notifications as well. We are producing sports betting and fantasy football content around the clock, so make sure to stay up to date with videos from your favorite Awesemo hosts. If you want to check out some other free content we are offering, you can find our fantasy football rankings in front of the paywall on the Awesemo.com fantasy football tab. And for sports betting, you can check out the Awesemo odds tab for access to Odd Shopper and our MLB betting tools, which include our sports betting model and player props. So you definitely want to check that out over at Awesemo.com. Next up, we go a matchup of Tecia Torres and Angela Hill. Tecia Torres is 8,700. Angela Hill 7,500 on DraftKings, 19 and 12 over on FanDuel, respectively. When I saw the DraftKings salaries on this one, I was like, "Ooh, it's a hefty price for Tecia Torres." And I don't know if I want to get there. I mean, I think she's going to win this fight, Pete. I just don't, from a DFS perspective, I don't think it's necessarily a great play.
Yeah, I would have to agree and say that, being a little underweight to this matchup is probably the way to go. I do favor Tecia Torres in the bout. I think that she can match the striking of Angela Hill despite the reach advantage. I will say that Tecia Torres can mix in some takedowns, which I think could lead to possibly an elevated score. But I just see this going 15 minutes, and I think that the ceiling for Tecia Torres is a little higher because of her her style and what she does in her fights, where she mixes in takedowns, lands some good strikes, has high volume. Whereas Angela Hill really just will be defending takedowns and just producing strikes. I think that, Angela Hill's somewhat capped at 7,500, even a decision victory. I think that, Tecia Torres could surprise us even at 8,700, but I'm okay with getting underweight to it because there's tons of other matchups on the card that I want to get some exposure to.
Samuel, appreciate you in the super chat. Of course, we'll get to your questions there at the end of the show. I just happened to look up the odds on this fight goes the distance, Pete. It is as high as minus 450.
I was going to say minus 400. Yeah, I mean, it's a rematch, and I'm excited to see how this goes. But I really feel like, Tecia Torres will probably go out there and win pretty handily. I think that anytime Angela Hill gets a little comfortable, Tecia Torres will clinch her, work towards taking her down. And that's always been the Achilles heel for Angela Hill is her ground game and getting controlled on the mat at times. She's gotten better. She has improved. But I still feel like, Tecia Torres will come out victorious.
Yeah, I'm with you on there. And yeah, this is as I look at my sheet of where I've got marked off as fights I believe have a extremely high probability of going the distance. This is one of those matchups. Now, our opening fight of the pay-per-view will be a matchup between Song Yadong and Casey Kenney. Casey Kenney, 8,200, 8,000 for Song Yadong over on FanDuel. A little bit of a different story here. $18 for Kenney, $13 for Song Yadong. I talked to Casey Kenney about 2 weeks ago, and my biggest takeaway, actually it was last week I talked to him. My biggest takeaway was he really talked about he's got to be a complete fighter. And the other big thing I took away from it was he talked about after the Dom Cruz fight, he took a month off, didn't go into the gym. It was a planned thing. He had like 8 fights in 2 years, and team's just like, you know what, you got to have a break. And he's like, yeah, I stayed away. But I thought the biggest thing to me was him talking about being a complete martial artist, which immediately the first thing that said to me is, I guess he's going to use he's going to go to his wrestling roots here because a lot of people, we've seen Casey Kenney as a striker, but his background is wrestling.
Yeah. Well, that might change some things for me because, honestly, I feel like this is a 50-50 fight. I feel like it's priced accordingly. Song Yadong has looked incredible. but he at times can get taken down and lose fights because, despite being at Team Alpha Male, he still gets taken down. Some exciting striking. Casey Kenney comes forward a lot, throws high volume. In the Nathaniel Wood fight threw a ton. He started getting tired and fatigued in round 2, and even in round 3, but he resorted to some takedowns, and that's kind of what solidified that fight for him. So I think that if he goes back to the takedown well, like he's kind of implying, I was going to say I would go a little underweight on this fight. Now I feel like I need to get some exposure to it. Initially, I like what Song Yadong can do, and I like his promise. Obviously, mental burnout is a real thing, and that's something I worried about with Casey Kenney with all his activity. But the fact that he's taking time off is something that is great. His coaching staff clearly addressed that. Taking time off, allowing your body to heal, allowing your mind to kind of just get back in the right place. Naturally, the 8,000 and 8,200 fights are very difficult to get away from. I will have a slight lean towards Casey Kenney with the takedown potential.
Dylan mentions, he goes, Song Yadong already has some close/questionable decisions outside Texas. So this is a sketchy fight.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Exactly. And, man, we'll have to see how this fight goes. But naturally this salary range is difficult to get away from.
This is another fight that I think has a recipe for going 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And, I feel pretty confident in several other fights, and that I feel like there's higher potential in other matchups where this could be like the victor is going to be within the 85 point range.
I mean, look, this may be a UFC card where you may only have one fighter on the main card, and you might feel pretty good heading into the pay-per-view, because I will tell you this right now. The first 4 fights on the pay-per-view, I think all of them have a high probability of going the distance.
I think you might be right, buddy.
I'm glad that you agree with me.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, it might be a long night, but also on nights like this, MMA is crazy. Like I said, it's the toughest to predict. You put a lot of time into viewing tape and looking at stylistic matchups and all that. But at the end of the day, you don't know how somebody is, in their headspace. So a lot of it is mental, and it's all who's better that day, not who's the better fighter.
Look, at the end of the day, if the main event goes a distance, I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
Does Derrick Lewis have a 25-minute gas tank?
That's my fear, right? I don't think he does.
Yeah, even though Ciryl Gane is kind of, he's built for 25 minutes.
Right.
I just don't think Derrick Lewis is built for that. Now, the headliner of the preliminary card is going to be Bobby Green versus Rafael Fiziev. And, of course, Bobby Green, I feel like every time we have a Bobby Green fight, I bring it up. November 2013, last time we went out there and got a stoppage victory. That was against Jane Krause. That was a fight for the troops card. He is 6,900. Rafael is 9,300. $22 and $8 respectively over on FanDuel. I guess with Bobby Green, he has been stopped. I want to say the last time he was stopped was by Dustin Poirier back at UFC 199, which is the anniversary of that. I want to say it was this week. But he's a guy that, he goes a distance. The only thing you hate about Bobby Green is, he gets hit and then he tries to play off like he didn't get hit. And it's like you just told the judges you did get hit. I think the only question, if you want to pay up for Rafael, is can he get a finish in this matchup? I mean, obviously he's a very talented striker.
Yeah. I mean, Rafael Fiziev is a fantastic talent within the division, and training now at Sanford MMA, and formerly he might still be the striking coach over at Tiger Muay Thai, but I know they faced some issues because of the pandemic. But Rafael Fiziev, even at Sanford MMA, he's surrounded by talented fighters, talented wrestlers. I really like that move, and I like that gym moving forward. Bobby Green at 6,900 is ridiculously cheap for a guy who's always in close fights. He plays around too much, so there's no way I'm going to pick Bobby Green to come out victorious in here, and he's notorious for losing decisions. So I'm not picking him to win, but I will say that his takedowns are interesting. He can, have great moments in there. His boxing's strong. It is. He shoulder rolls a lot. I think that he will get cracked and hurt numerous times against Rafael Fiziev. But at 6,900, it just comes down to some people are just too cheap. And even in a loss, right? In a loss to Thiago Moises, Bobby Green scored 53. In a loss to Trinaldo, he scored 40. In a loss to Drakkar Klose, he scored 52. So depending on how the slate is, even a losing fighter, Bobby Green, could make it into the optimal if some of these high-priced options end up, pumping out some high scores. Just be aware of that. I am favoring Rafael Fiziev, pretty heavy. I think that he's going to go out there and just outclass Bobby Green everywhere. So at 9,300, I will be paying up for Rafael Fiziev, but I'm definitely going to get to some exposure of Bobby Green at 6,900.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing about Bobby is just, I mean, he's tough, but I just want to see some little more volume out of him. And but Fiziev, I mean, look, he's a very talented striker. Tiger Muay Thai, I do believe, is closed right now because of the pandemic. I want to say he's been training down ATT. I want to say it is. So I do think he is the right side to go with this, but this is another fight that I think potentially has the recipe of going 15 minutes as well. Next up, we got a matchup of two fighters coming off a layoff, Vince Morales and Draco Rodriguez. Vince Morales, 7,800, 8,400 for Draco Rodriguez. Vince Morales coming off that injury, a guy that, you look at the fact of his cousin's Ricky Simone, you think, okay, his cousin's Ricky Simone, he's going to be a wrestler. That's not what Vince Morales does. He wants to keep it up on the feet. It's one of those fights. I'm not sure which side is the correct side to go on. I do kind of feel it's a 50-50.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty volatile matchup and a fight that we need to have in our lineups for GPPs. I think there's going to be high scoring potential. Draco Rodriguez, getting knocked out in his previous fight against Ayman Sahabi. He looked okay until he got caught with a really, really hard shot. And that's twice now in his career that he's been knocked out. So we always talk about having a chin issue or possibly not being able to absorb damage as well as you used to. And I am worried always about a fighter coming back from a knockout loss, right? Especially when you're going up against a guy who, I mean, let's call it what it is. Vince Morales likes to throw hands, and his hands are actually really good when he lets them go. I will say that I listened to a couple of interviews and I saw Vince Morales has been at Syndicate, and he's been, been there for quite some time now. Yeah. And I do like that gym. And I do like the fact that Draco Rodriguez has been recently knocked out. I mean, for DFS wise, of course, I think that Vince Morales actually might be an underdog that I'm targeting this week. I'm going to say that Vince Morales will go out there, and I think that he's going to knock out Draco Rodriguez. But if you look at the careers of both guys, they've both been finished in their losses. Whereas Vince Morales has been submitted, and Draco Rodriguez has tons of submissions off of his back. He's pretty dangerous, but I think that Vince Morales could touch him on the chin. And if there is an underlying chin issue, we could be looking at an underdog that comes through. So it's a lean towards Vince Morales. I'm picking him to win, but this is a GPP fight for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Las Vegas, there was a time for a while. It just, a lot of guys were not heading to Vegas to train, but that really has changed primarily because of PI, and Vince Morales is one of those guys that has taken advantage of that situation. You're just seeing more and more fighters are leaving wherever they live and going over to train over there in Las Vegas. Now, of course, today's show is sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. Of course, we've been telling you about Monkey Knife Fight for some time. So with Monkey Knife Fight, you are in charge. Head over there, sign up right now, as Monkey Knife Fight has an instant first match deposit of up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code AWESEMO. As I was going through my sheet today in terms of the Monkey Knife Fight, I did find some what I thought were some interesting ones. Interesting in the co-main event of Jose Aldo and Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz, total strikes landed 94.5. Jose Aldo, 62.5.
I'd probably say more for Jose Aldo and less for Pedro Munoz. I think Pedro Munoz is just too slow.
Yeah. The other one that kind of stuck out to me is Tecia Torres and Angela Hill. Tecia Torres, 114.5 and 86.5 for Angela Hill. My first thought is, if Tecia Torres is going to hit that number, to me means she got this fight to the ground. She just landed a bunch of short shots on the ground, but man, that's a lot of strikes in a 15-minute matchup.
It is. I think for me, I don't know if she can reach that, because I think she's going to be clinching with Angela Hill, working takedowns into the fold as well. And that's why I would say less. The Angela Hill side is pretty interesting because she's going to do everything in her power to throw strikes and throw them at high volume. So I have a little difficult time with that one. I will actually say double less, I believe.
Yeah, it's one of the things I always talk about here on the strategy show is you got to hop on these monkey knife fight lines early because sometimes you can get a little bit of an edge. I will tell you on Saturday before lock, myself and Greg will have a 30-minute show talking about monkey knife fights. So look for that there on Saturday. If you got any monkey knife fight question, of course, appreciate their sponsorship here of the Awesome MMA Strategy Show. Let's move on. Next up, we got a matchup at Alonzo Menified, Ed Herman. Alonzo Menified, 9,200, 7,000 for Ed Herman. I mean, look, I'm picking Alonzo Menified, but if this thing hits mid at 6, I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, I'm picking Alonzo Menified as well. I think that, he's evolving slowly. And I do think that Ed Herman's on his way out within the UFC. I think that he can, he's tough and he has a really, really solid BJJ game too, in his back pocket. So that's why at 7,000, I will have exposure to Ed Herman, but I'm picking Alonzo Menified. I think that he's going to be able to go out there on the feet, have the advantage in that department. I think that he's just really, really physical. I like what I've seen from Alonzo Menified in moments, but I view this fight as just completely untrustworthy either side. If you are on the Ed Herman side, like you're praying that he's going to tie up with Alonzo Menified, work his grappling, try to take him down, try to tax his cardio and possibly take advantage of him on the mat, land a submission, or even just squeak out a decision. So Ed Herman at 7,000, in addition to Vince Morales, will be guys like I think Vince Morales is going to win the fight. Ed Herman's a guy I will need to get exposure to around that 15% range for my GPP lineups, but it's Alonzo Menified could go out there and get that Francis Ngannou bonus.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing I'll say about Ed Herman. I think that's going to be a live betting situation potentially if this fight hits the second round, because obviously the huge concerns that we have in terms of Alonzo Menified's gassing. But this is an improving fighter, no question about it. But that obviously is the big concern. I mean, when you're over on DraftKings at $9,200 or $21 over on FanDuel, I mean, you're paying a high price that you're just sitting there going, okay, get that first round stoppage, Alonzo Menified, or otherwise you're going to be a little bit of a concern. Now, the next matchup, true, false. Let's go in 15 minutes.
True, I think.
Oh, it's true. It's true. Carolina Kowalkiewicz and Jessica Penne. Jessica Penne, 7,900, 8,300 for Kowalkiewicz, and over on FanDuel, $17 for Kowalkiewicz and $12 for Jessica Penne. I don't mind the $17 price tag over on FanDuel. The reason being, she's going to have to stop some takedowns.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that Kowalkiewicz is the side to play here for me. I think that despite her terrible track record lately, I think that she can go out there and get a win over Jessica Penne. I really do. Jessica Penne didn't really impress me too much in her previous performance. I understand what she brings to the table. She has solid grappling, and that's a tool that can always win your rounds. And control time is huge. We see it all the time. Each week we see control time versus damage almost weekly, right? Like, how are the judges going to score that? Are they going to score the more damaging strikes, or are they going to score somebody who had more control time? For me, it's Kowalkiewicz, though. She has pretty high volume, and I just think that she's going to be able to go out there and kind of get back to her old self. It's always tough to tell when somebody's been struggling for so long, but it's not like Jessica Penne's been like fantastic. She's 1-4 in her past, 1-3, sorry, in her past 4 fights as well. So, man, I think that Kowalkiewicz at 8,300 is somebody that I have my eye on and I will be playing, but I'm not really expecting much in terms of DFS production.
I don't like this fight for DFS.
Yeah.
The one thing that concerns me about Carolina in this spot is when you think of the octagon, you have that black line, and so basically you're a foot or two away from being right at the fence. That's my concern with her, is that she finds herself with her heels behind that black line for a majority of this fight, and I think that if it does happen, it is favor Jessica Penne.
100%. It's a great analysis, and maybe at 7,900, maybe I'm being a little too harsh on Jessica Penne. Maybe the grappling possibility and potential is something we always have to kind of have our eyes on. I won't uncheck Jessica Penne as much as I want to. I won't do it. I'll include her in my underdog pool, but I'm still picking Kowalkiewicz to walk away victorious.
Jessica Penne is my pick.
Really? Okay. You think she get?
I think it's the grappling. I think she'll be able to, because I look at Carolina, a fight that I'm always going to target Carolina is a fight that I believe it's a striking matchup where she's not going up against a power puncher. But I just think that Jessica Penne, it's going to be a big grappling base. Do I love her DFS? No. I don't mind Carolina as a play on FanDuel, though, just because she is going to have to stop takedowns in that one. Then we got a flyweight matchup between Manel Kape and Ode Osbourne. Ode Osbourne, the underdog in this one, 7,200. Manel Kape, 9,000. Manel has been a disappointment since coming to the UFC from Ryzen. I mean, we all had this high expectations of him of like, hey, this guy could be a title challenger at 125. And we just haven't liked what we've seen, Pete.
I will say that, it just goes to prove how strong the competition is within the UFC. And Manel Kape looked excellent outside the UFC. And coming in, I think that there's a ton of promise for him. And I still think that there can be. And I really feel like recency bias could possibly be going a little too far. And I understand why people are excited about Ode Osbourne, because it looks like he's extremely dangerous. But I don't really look at this matchup as a favorable matchup for him, to be honest, because you're dealing with a guy who's not going to sit there in front of you and stand there and allow you to hit him. You're dealing with Manel Kape, who has fantastic footwork, fantastic boxing. And despite getting taken down several times against Matheus Nicolau, usually has some wrestling in his back pocket to make things interesting. So I know Ode Osbourne is pretty solid in the jiu-jitsu department, and off of his back will work towards submissions, but he's on his back quite often in some fights. Like, what does that tell you? It tells you that his wrestling defense isn't really, up to par. And I do think that the in and out movement of Manel Kape, I think he's going to walk away victorious here. If Ode Osbourne goes out there and puts away Manel Kape, Ode Osbourne's legit. He's so legit. And that goes to show you how tough Brian Kelleher is. But for me, I think Manel Kape's going to, get back on the horse and walk away victorious here and look good doing it.
One of the commenters over on YouTube says, concerned about the reach disadvantage for Manel Kape in this one. 5-inch reach advantage for Ode Osbourne. I
mean, normally I would say that, being at a reach disadvantage is huge. And it usually is, because fighters don't have good footwork. Manel Kape has good footwork. So he's really good at entering into their bubble and getting close to land his shots and, evading and getting out, cutting an angle, switching sides. So I would say generally I would be worried about a reach, disadvantage, but I think that Manel Kape, I like him in the matchup, to be honest.
Well, before we move on to the next matchup, let's put a little spotlight on some of the people that have gone into the Awesemo Hall of Fame. Of course, you got to be rocking that Awesemo avatar on your DFS profile, placing the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 entry. Tweet your wins to @Awesemo HOF. You'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Only one free month can be awarded to a user per calendar year. Congratulations for Daniel last weekend, taking down first place in a UFC contest as he took down his first GPP. So congratulations to you there, Daniel. Hopefully you can go out there and do it again. Also, Texas Advo coming in first place as well. Nice little lineup there. of 700 points. And we kind of always joke of that's really where you got to go at this point as well. Uresa also coming in there as well. JP taking down a MLB contest. Also, Shaky coming down in second place in MLB contest, taking down $25,000. Congratulations. As always, love seeing those screenshots of what you go with your wins there, whether it's on DraftKings, FanDuel, or whatever DFS it may be. So congratulations to you there. Let's move on to a matchup that we broke down a couple weeks ago. It ended up getting scrapped due to COVID. Miles John and Anderson Dos Santos. I believe it's the same exact salaries before, 8,900 and 7,300. Has your thoughts changed at all in this fight?
Because of the fight card, I feel like this might be one of the fights we need to target. Okay. So I think the landscape of the slate has really, changed my mind of like, man, I might have to roster this fight just because of how many other fights I'm predicting to go the distance. I will tell you that I feel like, Anderson Dos Santos is dangerous and has submission skills, has knockout power as well. Miles Johns has looked better and, works behind his jab pretty well. But if you look on a lot of his regional tape and even in the UFC, when he starts to trade, he's pretty wide at times. And I do worry about him getting caught with a shot from Anderson Dos Santos, who's extremely wide, but powerful. So I think it's going to come down to who lands first. Who do I think is the better fighter? I think Miles Johns is the better fighter, but this is MMA. The better fighter doesn't always win, which is why, MMA DFS is extremely difficult. I'm going to have exposure to both sides in this fight, and I think it's the right way to go about it. I think Miles Johns wins this about 7 out of 10 times, in my opinion. I think that he can mix in takedowns, avoid the submission skills of Anderson Dos Santos on the feet. If he's just going to be a little cleaner and a little tighter, he should have no problem. If he starts getting to a firefight, flip a coin, who lands first, and they're going to walk away with a pretty high score. So it's Miles Johns for me at 8,900, but beware.
Over on FanDuel, $20 for Miles Johns. Do you want to get there?
Probably not, right? Like that's pretty high. I don't know if I would get that high over on that platform.
Next up, we've got a female matchup, which will be the second fight of the night. Victoria Leonardo taking on Melissa Gatto. Gatto 8,800, Leonardo 7,400. What's your take, Pete?
This is the unknown factor on this card, right? We always have these unknown factors, and Melissa Gatto's absence is something that really nobody outside the people in her camp can tell you what she's been doing or what she's been working on or how much she's evolved. It just comes down to, if you're really looking back on that regional tape and you think she's going to be the same fighter moving forward, then maybe you think that, Victoria Leonardo could walk away victorious. But for me, I like what I've seen out of Gatto, like from an aggressive jiu-jitsu standpoint. Mm-hmm. I think at 8,800, we could be looking at somebody who could be working towards a finish. She does end up on the mat at times on her back, which is always a worry about losing a decision. But I will tell you, from some of the footage I have seen of her training, she's incorporating takedowns, which is great. If she lands in top position, I think that she can solidify rounds and possibly win in dominant fashion. So I kind of like the unknown factor over Melissa Gatto, who has a pretty big win over Ciryl Gane, who's looked fantastic in the UFC. So I'm going to take my chances and kind of ride with the unknown factor in Melissa Gatto 8,800, Victoria Leonardo 7,400. Not really a fighter I want to get to be honest. I think if she wins, it's going to be boring. I don't think she's going to really produce as far as DFS is considered.
Yeah, Gatto is going to be one of those fighters when you're really watching ownership to see kind of where that goes. Could that maybe potentially come a little bit of a leverage play? Yeah. In terms of this one, we always talk about that 89, 88, 8,700, 8,600. Who in that range is going to be that leverage play to potentially get to? Now, our first fight of the night, we got Johnny Munoz taking on Jamie Simmons. Munoz 9,100, Simmons 7,100. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you that, I'm interested with this matchup because first fight of the night tends to be a part of the optimal. It's volatile. And that's why for the longest time, you didn't enjoy having exposure to it because it's just like, no matter what.
Still don't.
Right. Like, I don't like it either because it's just like, you need it, but you don't feel good about it no matter what. I will say that Jamie Simmons, in his losses has been finished via submission and by knockout, whereas Johnny Munoz has a better record. He's 10-1. I like the tape that I've seen on Johnny Munoz, to be honest. Solid striking, but it's the grappling, the wrestling, and the jiu-jitsu that's kind of like pushing me in his favor. And I do think that, Jamie Simmons, if you look at his regional tape, he has some explosive takedowns, but in several fights, he's in submissions. He's fully locked in submissions and he's slamming his way out, which is something that, really shows that you're a little green to that area of the sport, because usually slamming out of certain submissions is not the way. Like a triangle, slamming your way out of a triangle is not usually the best decision. You tend to make that tighter, and he's done it quite often on the regional side. I think that Johnny Munoz, honestly, is going to go out here and get a finish over Simmons. I really do. 9,100, really hard to pay that price tag. But if you think, if you look, he scored 63.1 in his debut against Nate Maness. And a lot of people, including myself, thought he won that fight. So that would have been 93 points in a victory over Nate Maness, who I believe is a better fighter than Simmons. So I think Munoz is a very sneaky play here at 9,100, and I'll have plenty of exposure.
Yeah, I like the jiu-jitsu aspect for Munoz in this matchup. So we got about 10 minutes here left in this show. Line those questions up right here on YouTube, also in Slack. We'll get to those before we get out of here. Of course, coming up after us will be MLB Deeper Dive with Eric and Adam to get you ready for tonight's MLB slate. Before we get into our fight picks, do want to let you know we want to get access to all the great tools and content we have over awesemo.com. You got to sign up for an Also Plus weekly pass for $29.95. Gives you access to all the great premium data and tools we have, including ownership projections, our Slack channel, and so much more. And if you're a new user of Also Plus Platinum, then you can take advantage of the promo code we have for the show, which is MMA Strategy Show, all caps, one word. That's MMA Strategy Show for 25% off your first week of Also Plus Platinum. Of course, if you just want a MMA weekly pass, you can get that for $8.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Pete, before we get our fight picks, you ready for the number on finishes?
Hold on.
My number?
All right, we got 13 fights. All right, let's see it.
Do you have a number in your head? You don't have to tell me what it is. Do you have a number?
4.5.
That is exactly my number, 4.5.
Yeah, exactly.
I literally have it written down here. I got 13 fights, 4.5. Love to hear from everyone watching. 4.5 stoppages. You going over or under? I thought putting at 5.5, everyone would go under.
I'm going to say over. I am going to say over. And it's just going to be hard to pinpoint which ones. I think the prelims, targeting the prelims for not majority of your lineups, but for the high ceiling fighters is the way to go. But yeah, I'm going to say there's 5 finishes on this card.
Yeah, I was looking at it. And so here's the fights I think have a high probability going the distance. Aldo Munoz, Chiesa Luque, Torres Hill, Yadong Kenney, Green Fiziev, Kowalkiewicz Penne, Johns Dos Santos. Do you disagree with any of those?
A little tricky. A lot. The Miles Johns Dos Santos fight, I feel like somebody's getting finished in that one. I really do.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the pay-per-view could be a long way to get to the main event. I'm just saying.
Yeah, right. I'm going to be at work just like, dude, it's going to be 1 o'clock.
Let's get into our straight up fight picks. Of course, Tyler has put a little pull up there on the over under stoppages. Love to see how everyone votes for that one. Main event, give me Ciryl Gane.
Yeah, Ciryl Gane.
Co-main event, I went kind of back and forth, but I'll side with Jose Aldo.
Jose Aldo.
Give me the upset, Michael Chiesa.
Michael Chiesa.
I will take Tisha Torres.
Tisha.
Give me Casey Kenney.
I'm going to say Song Yadong, even though like you kind of convinced me in Casey Kenney. I'm going to, just for straight up fight pick, I'm going to say Song Yadong.
Give me Rafael against Bobby.
Yeah, Fiziev.
Then I will take don't feel great about this fight either way, but give me Vince Morales.
Vince Morales, let's go.
I will take Alonzo Menified. Give me Jessica Penne in the upset.
Kowalkiewicz.
Manel Kape. You got to go there. I'll take Miles Johns.
Agreed. Miles Johns.
Give me a Melissa Gatto. And I will take Johnny Munoz in the opening fight of the night.
Johnny Munoz as well. I mean, if for DFS, right? Like, you have to like pinpoint your DFS picks and set them. I think there's a difference between DFS picks and betting, right? Like, I feel like you can make an argument for some of them being, similar, where it's like, okay, I'm going to back this guy on both platforms. But I will tell you that certain fighters are a little bit more appealing for DraftKings or FanDuel as they are in the betting. Like Rafael Fiziev, like I think that he's going to win pretty handily. But paying up is something that's always in discussion. It's like, okay, do you feel comfortable with the rest of your lineup by spending $9,300 for Rafael Fiziev, something like that?
Mention 2 questions before we get into the super chat that we got before the show. Golf Guy asks, he says, who would you have the most exposure to for a FanDuel GPP, and who would you have the least? In terms of the least side of it, I would probably go with the least, probably Tisha Torres on the least side of it.
On FanDuel?
On FanDuel. $19 for a fight that I think it's going to go 15 minutes. She's not going to be, I mean, she could get takedowns, but it's not like she's stopping takedowns. I just think of that price range. There's other fighters I'd rather get to as a pay up option.
Yeah. I mean, from a mediocre and high price standpoint, I get what you're saying. There's plenty of other fighters I'd want no business having on FanDuel. But you have to pick and choose who's going to be defending takedowns and who's not. That's why Vicente Luque is somebody over on that platform that makes more sense.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of being over, having the most exposure on a FanDuel GPP, it's kind of hard for me to get away from Ciryl Gane. I really like him in that matchup. I will probably have way too much Michael Chiesa though.
I'm kind of like 50-50 on that fight, to be honest. I like Chiesa for DraftKings because of the takedowns and the control, but I really feel like we've seen both these guys, get finished or lose fights by facing fighters similar to their opponent. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that either one on any given night can win this fight. So I'm interested in it. I think it's going to be pretty pivotal for a lot of people's lineups.
Hunter asks, he goes, what do you think the odds are that Miles Johns keeps the fight on the feet?
I think it's going to be, it all depends, right? Like, it's so hard to predict because it's all based on feel. Like, if he gets rocked with a shot, I think that's where he could start to resort to wrestling, which is always dangerous. I think that I'd probably say for the majority of the round, he'll be striking, and the takedowns will probably come as like all right, let's put a stamp on this round.
Samuel, appreciate you in the super chat. Before we get to his DFS questions, I'll mention his last questions. How many margaritas, Pete?
First day was definitely the under on that 2.5. But I feel like I definitely increased my tolerance over the course of this day. And I was having some good numbers, man. I think I was like 4 or 5. I tried some other stuff. It was damn good. I tried a Miami Vice. That was slamming. We were just having a damn good time. It was awesome. And I was happy to still be able to do that show on vacation. Thought that I was going to have some pretty bad quality, but it seemed to be okay.
Yeah. Of course, Sammy's got his usual questions. Let's start with the first one. Top 2 cash. Ciryl Gane's got to be one of them.
Ciryl Gane for me, right? And then, I mean, I think that Rafael Fiziev would probably be the other one.
I might say Johnny Munoz.
I like that. I think it's close between Fiziev and Munoz.
Top 2 GPPs.
Top 2 GPP targets. Who has crazy ceiling?
Potentially Alonzo Menifield could get
Agreed.
a finish in 60 seconds with his burst.
Agreed. I might say Melissa Gatto is like, no. I'll take that back. Johnny Munoz. It's Johnny Munoz for me. I think that, I've seen him fight in the UFC. There's a lot that I like about Melissa Gatto. It's just that unknown factor that I can't say, top GPP, but she's up there.
Underdog plays for me. I'm going to be looking at Michael Chiesa and Jessica Penne.
Underdog plays for me, buddy. Is Vince Morales for me. And it's Vince Morales and Michael Chiesa.
Top leverage play. We'll see how ownership goes, but potentially maybe someone like a Melissa Gatto is someone to potentially look at there. Maybe Miles Johns too.
A leverage play would be for me, Derrick Lewis, right? 6,800. Yeah. He lands a bomb. It's over, but I don't foresee that really happening.
Yeah. MVP champions. We'll try to get through some of these quick enough because I know we got MLB deeper dive. MVP. It's tough for me not to look at Ciryl Gane. Alonzo Menified, I think it's got to be another one. I do like Johnny Munoz.
I would agree with all those guys.
In terms of first fight in the optimal lineup, I think you got a good chance. If Johnny Munoz wins, I think you got a really good chance that is in the optimal there. And he mentions armbar from guard, pump plays. Derrick Lewis has got to be the number one pump play to sit there in terms of that. But if you do like Derrick Lewis to win, that Derrick Lewis v TKO KO plus 400.
I think that's the only way to play that. And armbar from guard is going to be Melissa Gatto. She's going to get a submission finish, in my opinion. Thank you guys for joining us today. Let's get us up to 150 likes, and we'll be back on Saturday. I can't wait.
We'll be back here on Saturday for Live Before Lock, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Coming up next is MLB Deeper Dive with Eric and Adam to get you ready for today's MLB action. Appreciate everyone checking in here today, and we will talk to you on Saturday for Live Before Lock. Good day, everybody.